Welcome, everyone. I am your host, Lindsay Briggs, and this is StartNow by Syracuse University. If you're interested in how trailblazing entrepreneurs got their start during their college years, then stick around. We can't wait to share this innovator's insight on how to run a successful business. Let's get started. Today we have Jonathan Jackson. Jonathan Jackson is a writer, a speaker, an entrepreneur focused on the intersection of community, culture, and commerce. As a co-founder and former head of corporate brand Blavity Inc, he helped spearhead go-to-market strategy and industry penetration, helping it grow to a media brand for Black millennials, Gen Z in the US, reaching over 40 million users a month. So glad to have you, Jonathan. Thank you so much for joining us on the Start Now show. Welcome.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So let's dive right into it. Blavity is what it is now, the big media, brand that it is. But you were one of the co-founders. Can you just talk about the path leading up to Blavity?
I graduated with a degree in political science and a minor in writing and American culture studies. And so I had moved to the Bay Area to work at LinkedIn. And so that's when I heard about the idea of Blavity, and it was in beta. And so when I moved to New York a year later, the idea was still active and we were sort of growing and building users. Over the next 2 years, we ended up raising capital. And so I was able to quit, and then we went full time. And so the Blavity that people kind of know now came out of a lot of different pivots. When we originally launched in 2014, that was Ferguson summer. And so that was a time of pretty immediate upheaval. Like I said, we went to school in St. Louis, so we were proximate to a lot of that in terms of not just proximity, but also knowledge of knowing certain people who were involved in those activism spaces. And so we were able to kind of give context to that in a way that other people weren't, or perhaps just weren't inside of what we were inside of. And so that sort of brought a lot of attention to us really quickly, because that period of time was really, really tumultuous. And so people were looking for information in specific ways, and we were there. So we filled a need. And we grew really quickly from there. And then the rest is documented history.
How did that feel to be at the helm of, that type of, information and be responsible for the information that's going out?
I don't know if I knew sort of the scope or scale. When you're building, you can kind of feel it, you can see it, you can sense it, but I think it was overwhelming. And also I was just younger than I am now. So I think when I was younger, I just didn't know what I didn't know. And I think there's value to that. Like I was much less worried. I was much less kind of like, what if? It was kind of like, there's a thing to do. So you can do it or you can wait on it, but you kind of have to make a decision. And so I think the feeling was, I think there's pride. I think it's definitely on my side, at least. Fear, like you wanna always get it right, which you inevitably won't. I think I had to learn a type of humility, because it's just, you get thrown into the deep end. And the question isn't whether you know how to swim, it's whether you can actually pace yourself to swim to like the next place where you can rest.
What would you say, what would be some of your advice to a student entrepreneur, aspiring entrepreneur in college right now, just around people relationships, because relationships are a big part of what you build and how successful and sustainable it is. And how was your relationship building in college before Blavity?
Yeah, I learned relationship building in high school. So I went to boarding school on a gigantic scholarship. So when I got to school, like I had to learn how the world worked in a way that I had never seen. I went to school out of state, so I'd never been to Missouri. I didn't know anyone. So, and I was also part of a program where I started in January. So I started a semester after everyone else. So I showed up and I needed friends because I'm like trying to figure out how this works. I think I was motivated and I think I was just always curious. And I think the best part about college is that like you have so many resources proximate to you, but there's so many other things that can compete for your attention. And so I think that the opportunity is the amount of people that you're proximate to. The challenge is the amount of people you're proximate to. So learning how to build relationships and then manage those relationships and then invest in those relationships are all skills that compound. So the more you do it, the better you get at it and the more things you can start. And I think if you can increase your failure rate, and by failure, I just mean things that you might not take all the way out, the more insight you can get about what worked, what didn't work, how it worked. And you're kind of in an environment where that isn't as costly as it would be somewhere else. So it's sort of like a testing ground with other people who might be willing to test it with you in close proximity where you can build and deploy and share with other people inside that community.
Can you talk a little bit about your path and what has been most rewarding for you in this work with Blavity?
I think what gives me joy when I think about it are the intangible things. So I got to see some of the best creatives I know grow. And I had a front row seat just by nature of me being a part of Blavity. And so it's like to see someone be like, I don't know. And then a year later be like, I figured it out. And then a year later be like, I'm in Fashion Week. Like, that's crazy. But like, I'm watching it. It's like I got to see people's lives in IMAX. Like, so to me, like, I can't put into words what it's like to see somebody actualize what's in them. And then other people are benefiting from them being who they're supposed to be. And then I just think like seeing Black people like joyful is just like great for me. Like that like does something to me. So I'm just like always here for that. Just like widening like what we're able to do, what we're able to say, what we're able to express, how we're able to express that, what expressing that looks like. That feels really, really valuable.
Tell us about some of the work you did in studying and researching diverse media ownership, especially as a Black media owner founder yourself.
When I think about media and ownership, I think about succession and longevity. So not just what do we own, but what is able to be perpetually there for us, and what does it look like, and how is it being made manifest, and in what ways are we doing it? Because I think you can have representation, but that does not mean equity, and it doesn't mean that things can actually scale and grow. And so I think you gotta be really careful when you invoke like ownership without being specific about what it means and what context you're in. And so specifically, I've looked at, people like a Byron Allen who went out and copped the Weather Channel, but then is continued to actually go on a buying spree and bring together disparate networks into a family of companies which reach households and is incredibly influential. And we have, on both the sort of media side and I think even the creative side, a swath of agencies and shops doing work that serve those consumers. And then you have producers of that content, and then you have writers, directors, DPs. Like you have an ecosystem that exists. So I'm not interested in talking about what doesn't exist. I'm interested in talking about, are we servicing more things that exist? Are we honest about what support there may need to continue to further an ecosystem? But the comment of like, I'm always here for more, but I'm also here for being honest about how little we've been taught to expect. So like the expectation that there's only gonna be a few is given to us. It's not true. So I don't want to deal in like what people gave me. I want to deal in what's possible and what is actually out here.
You said a lot of great things in there. Some things that that really stood out to me is, representation doesn't mean equity. We know you are not at Blavity anymore. What are you working on now?
So a few different things. I've been working on writing more. So there are a lot of things that I saw across the course of my career that I sort of indexed but never shared. So I'm working on an essay collection that I'm starting to think about, like mixed media a lot. I've been collaborating with my friends. One of my personal ethoses as I've gotten older has been to work with people that I can have at least a decade of interaction with. And so that's just a personal goal. It's like to know good people and to be able to work with them over the course of my life is an element of freedom. I had a niece last year, so I've just been working on like being an uncle. That's been really cool. And that's like a job. So it's like, how do I it's like, what's the JD for being an uncle? It's like, y'all learn Baby Shark. Yeah, like there's just like things I got to do. So I'm like really into that, being an active uncle. So
I love that. You talked about a plethora of things, but what stands out to me is like you're really designing your life, and that's the freedom. You talk about, liberation and freedom. And that's what I really see that you have designed. And it really could be the blueprint for us all that, you can do the things that you're interested in. Can you talk about why that's important for entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs to really design your life?
The business you build isn't the thing you'll do forever. And building a business or being a part of anything, all of that stuff is time, and it should be. And it's time you give, and there's seasons, there's ups and downs, there's all kinds of things. But you can also design the texture of that. Mm-hmm. So the genre of business you build is different than the person you become. I think there are grooves that you can continually create where you can actually check in. Like, am I actually doing the thing I would like to be doing? And I think there's a necessary check in there because the time will get spent. That's the thing. The time's gonna go. Either way. It is. So you owe not just yourself, the people you say you care about, the things you want to do, to be honest about that. And that realization is the beginning of the compound interest of betting on yourself. I think betting on yourself happens all the time, but I think one of the first things you can do to bet on yourself is to be actually honest enough, which is back to the experience collection, about what it is that stirs you. And that will change. So I think that to me is the ethos of the design, is like laying it bare and knowing for Jonathan, like nothing gets better when you're not who you are. Nothing improves, not a single thing. And it's risky, it's hard to be that version. It costs you to get through that. And it's not simple, it's not straightforward. So my path has been super windy.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you for that transparency and honesty. And that's where it starts, being honest with yourself. Earlier, you talked about networking. Any tips or tricks, especially for college students with their own ventures or stepping out into their careers?
Yeah, for sure. We can get real tactical here. So if you are, I'll split it two ways. So I'll talk about like networking across, like so peer to peer, and then there's something you want to talk to. So peer to peer is, I think, helpful because it actually gives you reps on how to communicate across and into things. I think kind of like networking gets this like weird kind of like stuffy context like a network, and it's like you're actually building relationships, and some relationships are transactional, and that's totally fine. Legitimately, like I like Air Max 95s. I'm in a fundamentally transactional relationship with Nike, and it will probably continue for the near future. But like, similarly, there are relationships in which you can literally help each other for a mutual ground, or you might need to learn something. And you will be surprised by, if you were trying to get to somebody you want to talk to, how valuable people find it when you respect their time and then you call on their expertise. So one of the ways to do that is to think about like not just who you want to talk to, but when you do communication, think about the way they're going to receive that communication. So it's one thing to write communication, but if you think about assuming this person is busy, assuming this person has a volume of information, how do you get to the point while also distinguishing yourself? If you're curious about someone, it's worth talking to them, because if you can find out what their interest is, or they can actually point you towards something, you've just shortcutted something that might have taken you years. So it's like, I think sometimes people are like, it was the wrong person. Sometimes it's not the right set of questions. So if it's not the most instructive conversation, you can still walk away with something. So the question is there something this person has access to that by virtue of asking, I might be able to get? So a question, if you weren't like the perfect fit, I might ask you, is there anyone else you would recommend as an expert in this? And then if they know the person, ask, would you be willing, based on our conversation, to send a preliminary introduction? So it's like sometimes there's that option where you actually get someone that can skip level you towards another person by virtue of how you treated them. Because people remember the quality of communication. So if they had a good experience, right, they are more willing to do that because now their credibility isn't at risk with you. So people remember, and then they want to actually help, I found, when they realize there's a genuine interest. And you can communicate that by following up, consistency, like the things you know to do.
Confidence has a lot to do with it too. Being clear on what you want to do, where you want to go. You might not know exactly, but you know the information that you need. And like, how did you work on your confidence as you were in college? Do you attest that to just being clear on who you were and what you wanted, or was confidence something that you had to work at?
I'm still working at it. There's things I'm incredibly not confident about, like this essay and this writing. Like, this is really hard for me. Like, I'm really nervous about it. So I think confidence, I think there's this misnomer that like you just become a supremely confident person. Right. The most confident people I know have, I wouldn't call it an insecurity about things, but they have a specific area where they're still at work. You just might not see that area because the thing they do publicly is the thing they privately practice, and you have no view of practice. You literally never see any practice. So I think confidence comes from the margins. It comes from feeling the discomfort and literally being like, and again. Mm-hmm. And again. It comes from the actual, like literally, like I'm on the edge, and again. And I think that college gives an opportunity to be at that discomfort because it shows up all the time. But it is a learnable skill to navigate the discomfort. And entrepreneurially, you're going to keep getting hit with that. You're going to keep seeing situations. There's going to be personnel challenges. There's going to be client challenges. There might be issues in terms of competition. And so there's all these elements that you learn and you can kind of cut your teeth on a little bit. My risk tolerance is directly correlated to having been like, wow, that was crazy. I didn't expect to fall from that high. Mm. And being like, wow, that's kind of crazy. Okay. Would we like to try again? Not necessarily the same mountain, maybe not even the same thing, but is there an opportunity here in which I can assess like how I slipped, how I felt, what I could have done? And then also the elements are the elements. When you talk about navigating through the discomfort, can you take us specifically on your journey to a moment where you had to navigate through discomfort? Maybe it was something that just dropped in your lap and you just kind of had to pick up and roll with the punches, even though it was very uncomfortable. I worked at LinkedIn before I went over to Blavity. And so the role I had at LinkedIn was the influencer program. So I managed sort of the relationships that the platform had to these business luminaries, Richard Branson, Damon John. My first week on the job, the guy that I got the job, I got referred into the job from, which was a dude that I knew from undergrad. He was like, "Hey man, here's the open list of people we haven't closed," because they had some targets that they wanted to close for the influencer program, and one of the targets was Damon John, the guy who founded Fubu, Shark Tank, and his office was in the Empire State Building where LinkedIn's office is. And so my first week on the job, I had to walk into their office and pitch their team on using LinkedIn cold. Like, just here's he wasn't there, but like his team was just like, why? He's already here. He's already big on social. Like, this is like, why? We don't even know how to use it. Looks like it sucks. What's even the value for us? What's the ROI? Like, they were cooking me. Just like day 4. There's interesting science around what happens when your adrenaline rises. But what happens is when your adrenaline rises, your body physically goes into fight or flight. I couldn't leave the room because I'm here to do a thing. And so I had to sit through my own discomfort. And what I realized is that if you can learn how to breathe through your own discomfort, you can continue on in any conversation. So if you're able to be like, I'm feeling this, this is awful, but also, can I keep this conversation progressing? That's it.
Some of us have actually left rooms because of the fear, because of the anxiety. And so we need to hear more stories of, successful founders and entrepreneurs like yourself that, hey, I actually have lived through that a few times, and this is what I got from it. Thank you so much just for being with us, Jonathan, for all of the great and valuable information and stories that you've shared tonight. It's been really, really helpful, amazing. Is there any lasting, words or advice that you would like to share with us?
Starting is a commitment. So when you start, you can actually decide, because sometimes people try to decide the how and then use that information to make them start. Nothing's going to make you start. The weather will not be good. The environment won't be great. The market won't be up. There'll never be a good enough reason. There'll always be a good enough reason to not do it, though. They will show up right when you're about to start. And so I guess what I'd say is that if you gotta go. But only you know. And when you make a decision, it's that decision is for you. It's not for other people. It's like your decision. So if you gotta go.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And thank you everyone for showing up. This concludes our Start Now series episode with Jonathan Jackson. And we will catch you next time on the next talk.
Join us next time on another episode of Start Now. To see more episodes, visit newhouse.syr.edu/startnow.